You are all welcome to this sixth Chakras annual meeting. Chakras is
del productor, de la demanda del productor para mejorar su sistema de producción.
it started as a result of the demand of the growers. Taking into account this demand, we align science, growers, and political sectors to improve this demand and to improve the productive systems. We have seen that farms have evolved and have been developed in this past few years. The focus is more system-oriented. The focus is to develop the societies where productive systems operate, to improve productivity, to be sustainable and be productive. So we have to work in a cross-disciplinary way involving different players. So we are not going to talk only about primary productions. We will take into account other aspects that are covered by this program. We are going to divide this presentation in three segments. First, the first segment will be presented by Miguel Taboada. He has been introduced. He's director of the Soil Institute of Castelar. He will talk about our role of being custodians of the soil or supervisors of the biosphere, going to the other role, which is controlling the way we are producing and what is the footprint that we are leaving with our production. Mr. Besang will talk about how we became a global factory after being the barn of the world. This involves the production of biomolecules, which are very complex. We are talking about being a global supplier and no longer being the barn of the world. This will allow us to connect to the world in another way and will open new horizons. Mr. Savasquez, he is the president of the executive board of a cooperative in the Chaco Paraguayo region. They have 3 million hectares under these cooperatives, and we were really impressed with what we saw. First, this includes a transgenerational glance. The Mennonites went from Canada to Russia, then they went to Mexico, and they ended up in Paraguay asking for a place where they can develop following their beliefs, respecting their beliefs. And really, it's impressive the way they developed. They add value in origin. They produce in 3 million hectares. Gustave asked when they opened the powder milk factory, they asked the government to build the road. They begged the government to help them connect Asunción with the place where this factory has been built, because the road was broken. Really, they made a great effort, and they left their life in this Paraguayan land. And they felt that they had to do things correctly, thinking of the following generations. And this was really impressive, because in Argentina, at least, we always think working for the short term. So the idea is to open our mind with this meeting to get away of the primary production without disregarding primary production, but considering what does it mean to add value, how we can insert that concept in our production system, and how can we insert Argentina in the rest of the world. So we have very interesting questions to be answered. So I'll give the floor to the first speaker, Miguel Taboada.
Por si acaso le puse otra cuestión, un subtítulo, que los suelos y cuáles son las situación hay de la Argentina. Y antes de empezar a hablar quería aclarar una cosa.
I apologize. There has been a problem with the wires. I concerned with environmental issues. I had to attend a meeting of the FAO and the Alliance of the Greenhouse Effect. So you get to know what's going on in other countries and how we are being regarded by others. I don't consider myself an expert in marketing. Probably Mr. Bissan can speak, has more knowledge about this, but I will say things that you may probably, with which you may probably agree with or not. I will try to answer and to speak about what they was asked to speak about, which is the soil as a custodian of biosphere. The soil is the main carbon store in Earth. Except seas, most of carbon in the soil, in the world, is in the soil. And this carbon is captured as CO2 as a result of the photosynthesis process. This carbon is sequestered or captured from the atmosphere, and this contributes to the mitigation of climate change. And this has to do with the management of climate change. The countries that has a high percentage of agricultural production are being looked at by the rest of the world, and we are considered responsible for climate change. The soil is the cortex of the earth, and this acts as a filter of what happens between the air we breathe and the water we consume. The elements of this filter are potentially toxic: heavy metals, trace metals, or trace elements in high concentration, or organic chemical products, for instance, the residues of the pesticides, for example. And the health or sanitary role of the soil prevents these toxic elements to be introduced in the food supply chain. This cortex, apart from the productive rule, the soil is considered it protects us from this situation. Regarding the first role of the soil, which is to store carbon, the way we have to assess or evaluate this role is to see what is the impact of farming activities on the greenhouse emissions. This is measured as the carbon print. Another workshop in April will show the first carbon calculator, and a very interesting discussion can come up. The carbon print and all the greenhouse gas emissions, the greenhouse gases resulting from the farming is CO2, NO2. This is the nitrous oxide that has to do with what penetrates into the soil. But the methane that is also issued or is also emitted by the cows, it is an enteric fermentation. So the soil cortex protects all these toxic elements to get into the food supply chains. And this brings up the idea of traceability. Traceability is the basis for the ISO 22000 standard. The third topic to bear in mind is that both the carbon print as the traceability of these elements, the agrochemical traces, are not required or are not demanded at the same level at the different world markets. Here is a standard for liquid milk. This appears in a supermarket. Here we have a stamp of a standard. It's a standard that has to do with a carbon print. This is being labeled also in some exported products in Argentina. An Argentine winemaker is exporting wines to Europe, indicating in the label the carbon print of that product. So this is not only standardized around the world, but it has to do with how stringent are the demands or the requirements of some markets. The idea of taking into account what has happened with carbon, on what is happening with the filtration role of the soil, is related to what has been happening in the past few years, which are the ecosystemic services provided by the soil. This regulation and filtration services, this is something that started after the millennium ecosystems, and this is not considered from the point of view of fertility or productive capacity, but also it has to do with the capacity to keep the environment clean, toxic-free. The FAO held a soil pollution symposium, and they talk about these potential sources, the use of pesticides, biosolid amendments, manure use, the irrigation, low-quality irrigation water, over-fertilization, and irrigation with recycled water that has not been treated. These are specific sources of pollution. And this is also more frequent in feedlots, for example. We also need to take into account the so-called diffuse contamination or pollution processes. This has not to do with over-fertilization, because we really have under-fertilization, but this has to do with an excessive use of pesticides. There is an international and national framework that favors an opinion which is contrary to what I have just said. I've been in Europe a while ago, and I had the dollar that was melting in my hand, so I couldn't afford a very expensive restaurant. I went to fast food stores. And you come across this notice. This is Fred creates handmade natural food, avoiding the obscure chemicals, additives, and preservatives common to so much of the prepared and fast food on the market today. So the advertising is that healthy food is the one that doesn't have additives or agrochemicals. When you go into a grocery store in Paris, you go to the shelves and you find this bio product. So I was wondering, is this organic agriculture? By no means. This is the biodynamic agriculture. Public opinion is very sensitive, and they believe that these products don't have any pesticides, any agrochemical. The urban European public they oppose to the use of pesticides and agrochemicals, and so they create this neighborhood markets with these new ideas, so these new requirements. This brings us to the fact that in the past 5 years, a new opinion focus occurred. Pope Francis talked about Laudato Si, which is an encyclical letter. he talks about the exposure to contaminants that affect health. It talks about contamination in water and in soil. Sometimes this is well grounded, sometimes not, but it is opposite to what happens in farming. When they talk about Argentina, they talk about industrial farming. They look down upon this type of farming, and they call it industrial farming. I started to analyze further the situations, and when you go to the OECD countries, you can tell the difference, or you can differ between three groups. The progressive countries that have very hard standards, other countries that have moderate standards that have to do with traceability, Canada, Brazil, and a few countries which are called regressive. Here there are no standards whatsoever. I think that Argentina is concentrating its sales to Southeast countries that has regressive standards, and it is more difficult to export to progressive standards country with very high traceability requirements. Also, Europe has the PDO, denomination of origin labeling, PGI and TSG. These guarantee traceability, denomination of origin, the origin of a product. How do they see Argentina? This has been published by the FAO, and it shows the use of pesticides per arable land. In the deeper blue shaded area indicates that we are applying 6.4 liters per hectare of pesticides of 26 hectares of arable land. This is not a good presumption. There are some papers that have been published in international journals that talk about the detection of glyphosates and AMPA in waterways and soils. This has been found in Pergamino, and this has been attributed to the agrochemical use. This is really a concern for me. We need to differentiate the sources. I think that there's some literature that can be considered serious. For instance, this work of Maria Carolina Sassal et al. She has conducted a monitoring of glyphosates in groundwater in Entre Rios. The highest concentrations appear in only a few cases. I think that this is a real effort to be transparent and to show the facts such as they are. These colleagues are showing in another journal the pesticide contamination in Argentina. This is interesting because it is showing that in spite of what everybody say about farming activities, the cases of pollution and contaminations probably have nothing to do with what happens in the farms. The household, the accidents or the household contamination are the most frequent than the farming cases of contamination. These books have been published. This is read by the urban urban audience. I don't say that this is not true, but really it has a negative goal, a negative intention, and this impacts negatively on farmers. And there are many anti-GMO soybean social movements. Leguizamón, which is an Argentine author that makes a difference between anti-neoliberalism movements and anti-agrotoxic movements. I don't agree with this terminology. She says stop with spraying of agrochemical products, and this is having a very negative effect. These things are not published so frequently. This is published in a newspaper, and this shows that the Argentine government is recording through SENASA the contamination rates of the fruits and vegetables that are sold in the central market. We speak about soybean, about fields, but we don't speak much about what happens at homes, in households, and we don't speak much about what happens with the fruits and vegetables we are consuming. To close, I can present some ideas. I believe that the world is no longer what it used to be. The 21st century world has very special public opinion in the highly developed country that are very stringent in their demands of products quality. It seems as our country is the only important exporter of agricultural products. United States, Canada, Australia. I think that our country is not well prepared to respond to this commercial questions. We are sort of vulnerable, and there are some things I can't accept. We have an acreage or a planted area of 32 million hectares, and we are talking about only 3 crops. Only with more sustainable production we will be able to generate a more ecological production. I think that we are doing that, but people don't know much about that, so we need to work harder. I've been in a FAO meeting with Pilu Giraudo, and we had to explain to them that the problem is not no-till, is the way you implement no-till, that planting only soybean is a problem. This is what we try to explain to them. And I think that ensuring traceability and environmental footprint of the products, of our products, will ensure the access to markets around the world which are very demanding. I think that Napoleon said some of these phrases. The war is too important to be considered by the military. I don't know who said this, but I think that this can be applied to environmentalists. I think that environment is very important to leave it in the hands of environmentalists and other ists that are hanging around and that they're really harming us a lot. I think that what they say has the burden of ideology. I think that we are responsible for these because we need to have to improve our dialogue with society. We have to be more transparent. We don't only need to be transparent, we need to show we are transparent. I think that this is the way that will help us improve. Thank you very much for your attention. I'll be glad to answer to your questions.
Roberto Bizan is also coordinator of the National Farming Census. It's a hard job that is going to allow us to have a lot more information for decision-making purposes, concepts such as competitiveness, sustainability, and development. How do we go from the sustainability and competitiveness to generate development? And that is the common ground for these 3 presentations. Well, thank you, Apreci. Thank you to the Chakras program. I feel as I'm home. And I'd like to just give you a general idea first, and then I'm going to develop it. I'm going to anticipate it, though. I think that great part of the problems that Argentina's into the world, whether it's supermarket, whether it's the barn of the world or whatever, depends on the productive structure that Argentina has. Argentina, at the end of the day, a tautology what I'm going to say, but it exports what it has and imports what it doesn't have. So right now what Argentina has to export and to go into the world, it's basically 6 to 8 sustainable products that are semi-processed that go into the world trade. On the other hand, what it doesn't have is a great metal, mechanic, and electronics deficit. If the exchange rate is not aligned, then we also have a tourism deficit. That's just about the reality. That's just to give you a background. And the problem is that is not compatible with the job creation or with the territorial distribution or with the sustainability of the balance trade, of the trade balance. So when you think ahead, and that's where the conversations really start, what are the chances that Argentina has to change the production structure, and what does the farm have to do with it? And I'm going to put the farm between inverted commas because the farm is something that was defined in a way and then in the future is defined otherwise. And that's where the idea of being the farm, the barn of the world, and the biofarm. So what are the challenges? What is the productive structure from here on to 20 years that will allow Argentina to generate job creation that includes 30% of the population that is outside city limits? And I think that's the core issue. It also has to balance the placement of the debt. As you know, bond trading that has short-term benefits. It relocalizes the economic activity. It's horrible what's happening with the economic activity, both in production and in people. When people are not grouped correctly, clustered correctly, so social problems arise, very difficult problems such as crime, health, etc. And it also has to be sustainable. So within that challenge, what I think is, what is the farm's role? And when I think about the farm, I think about the extended farm. The world. Okay. Here and there, the world seems to me to have three things that define the future of biological conversations. I used farm before, I said biological activity now. I feel that we are in a convergence between ITCs, biotechnologies, and metal mechanic. I would say that drones doing market research in the varieties of new vegetables in the crops is like the science of what I've just said. And the world is open right there. As a matter of fact, there are many guys, most of them wearing earrings, that were all tech through this trilogy, and they're in another room, but the world is right there, and it opens up great opportunity because most of those Argentinian entrepreneurs, they go abroad and they open a new road, a new path for them. So the world is not closed, which is a pretty good news, I would say, and this has not yet started. I'm sorry, this has not ended yet. This is right now in its prime time. And now let's talk about products. I think that businesses go faster and they go in value chains, and products are part of that chain. So where in the biological chain does Argentina want to interfere? Is it in seeds, in semi-produced products, or in technology, or in pure technologies such as no-till in South Africa? Any of those are part of the international going into the world market for Argentina, but it's outside just grain and meat. And that is a new concept at world level. This forces public-private partnership, having international policies and standards, to having a supply chain that is specific. Selected grapes come 3 months from Israel, 3 months from California, and 3 months from another place. and the working machinery is always the same. So that is there is another opportunity right there. So another question is, where is the real deal? Economists are great for inventing things that are not proven, but they say that it's in the smile, in both of the tips of the smile. So on the first stage, there is a lot more innovation in the seeds than in the grains. With or without a law, there is much more innovation. And on the other side of the smile, global logistics, certification, standards, they take a great part of the business, or at least some points, with zero risk and zero working capital at a very fast rate. So they recover their money very fast, they invest very little, and they have low climatic risks. So in the business world, the feeling is that you have to be right in the middle. That's where we are right now, where you have to have a lot of fixed assets, a lot of climate risks, and we support the market variability. And that business, we want to get out of there very quickly. So this is a world that, in like this slide, and in order to close this slide, this is the world in which Argentina is going to go into in the future. Now let's rethink this productive matrix. If I asked an average Argentinian that is over 50, what do you understand by local industry? And if he lives in a city, what does he think about how to go into the world? He's going to say this. Do you remember this? And if he knows a little bit better, maybe Winco, and if he likes cars, he's going to tell you a Torino. And if he's more in the chemical side, the Mosconi chemical plant, for those who knew that plant, and the chemical synthesis that Bagot used to back in the 60s or 70s that then folded. So that's what over 50-year-old guy from Argentina, average Argentinian, will say. And behind that, we say, okay, we have to go back to that, because with that, we're going to go back into the world. If you ask somebody that is under 30, what is industry, what is technology, the first thing they'll say is cell phones. And then their version of the 50s, taken to now brought down to the 30s, is a learning model based on disassembling and starting to do with the same thing that we did with the Pampas, now with cell phones, electronics, in the card industry. That's exactly of all kinds of new electronics. So if we think about industrializing the cracking of the Bahía Blanca petrochemical plant, why don't we think about cracking of corn or syrup or milk cracking, which must be something that we'll do every day. They do every day with a guy that is going to present after me, and that's where there is a shock. This is industry, but it's biologically based industry, and that gives us an additional countersense. And in Argentina, we have something important to think about. If in the future we want to go back into the world, but in a different way, they're going to have to bridge that gap between what we have, what is already there, and what's coming, that is coming fast from the private sector, that more often than not goes very fast compared to public policies, the actual public policies, the actual ones, not the ones that they say is coming. So in view of that ecosystem, what is the role of farming? We have a problem with the letter A. What is within agriculture? My great-grandfather, that came to exactly do that, he came to the barn of the world's barn. And then there were exports and imports where we asked the farmers to give cheap, very, very cheap food through the regular approaches that we know, and allow me to get some of that food, to transfer that through some distorted taxes in the market. But now, in the view of the 21st century, we see this supermarket of the world as somewhere in between both worlds. But when you go to the world's supermarket, like the one you showed in your presentation, we agreed so that I could have a slide less by using his. What you see in this world's supermarket is that it's not supermarket per se. It is the bridge between consumer and producer. So that's one part of it, and the other part of it is part of a supermarket that is rethinking the problem. Supermarkets say, I don't want homogeneous products because their profit margin is low, they take a lot of shelf space, and my business is not there. That's not what I want to do. I want differentiated products, I want customer service, I want in-house products, and brand-owned products and sophisticated products, everything that is related to distribution, logistics, and design, basic design, marketing, and all that. So careful with the supermarket explosion, because Argentina is in conditions to go to a 3.0 supermarket, because we can have carbon footprint. It has some intelligent packaging indications, and that's the way supermarkets work right now. I'm sorry, I changed the supermarket word so much that I don't know if the supermarket word is fit here. And we'll go one more step. Global biofactories. In agriculture or in farming income, 15% of biofuels has a step in. And I don't want to think when the second line of biofuels start. And I don't want to think what happens when they go even beyond that second line of biofuels. So from being the barn of the world to being a global biofactory. So how to make it more efficient, and that's what biotechnology comes to play a role. People who know about it, they will speak better about this. And it transforms all that into biomass. And the role of the farm is not just grains and meat. It's biomass as a whole. We see the wheat farm, grain plus some weed, and the use of this slide to be used for biofuels. And those examples are very common in the future. And that's where Argentina really lacks development, is the industrialization of the biological mass to more sophisticated food, whether it's nutraseptic foods or probiotic food, and biofuels. And that's where the first biomaterial projects start up here in Argentina. They're still very small, they're advancing slow, but the use of biomass for biomaterials or to produce second-hand energies. So it's interesting because natural resources that used to be in the Pampas region, now they're in the non-Pampan region, and there is great light capacity in very poor regions where the possibility of transforming biomass is really high, and the potential benefits are huge from the job creation standpoint, from the location of people. And where is the world going? Germany, US, Japan are advancing on monomers and polymers, or natural origin polymers. Soy polymers, for instance, are the base of car seats in Ford in the US. That is iconic when we think about biomaterials. It would seem as though Argentina has some chances in this ever-changing world to start to be something else, not just a supermarket, and to be a global biofactory. In that global biofactory, the ones that really transform it all are bacteria, enzymes, microbes that they have a production and use and knowledge. And I think that industry has broken down the industry, the industrial side of it, and it still has not entered the collective knowledge, but it's a window of opportunity for Argentina that I think it's pretty special. Now, let's think about this. What is the farming business model? And this is something that will be discussed in the next talk that encompasses all of that. And that goes beyond food, it goes through biofuels, and in all, it's not just other thing than taking the energy that you take from one end and transform it into biomass. So the question is, what is the business model? And that will be explained in the next talk. But just one last remark about how to go into this global biofactory. How did we used to go into these global biofactories? Let's think back. Since the world is ever changing and the farming business world is right there, is a target. So private-public partnerships are key, and I think it's more like a GPS, an updated GPS to a changing world, more than just a stable or static, stagnant regulatory framework or promotional framework. And something about that quote in the middle. What regulatory or promotional framework should we use? Let me give you an example that I don't want you to find it offensive. The biofuels in Argentina are regulated by the hydrocarbons law. Biofuels in Argentina are produced in 4 or 5 provinces that do not have hydrocarbon reserves. So they are high consumers, but since the regulation is from last century, and very, very old regulation, what we see is that the private sector advances much faster than the laws in order to have a say into that biofuel and hydrocarbons law. So we have sector laws, metamechanic laws, hydrocarbon laws, but we don't have the counterpart in terms of industrial transformation into the biological. And that leads me to give you these final messages. Einstein said, and everybody knows this, one time I was in the middle of a traffic jam, and I saw this on this graffiti. It says, "Never go on the path because it goes to places where other people have gone." And I think with the biological and the global biofactory, Argentina has a window of opportunity to go where no one else has gone in this open world. And you can see that sand clock. Argentina arrived early to some biological technologies. We capture carbon through no-till. We get biotechnology, and we have a great genetic development both at vegetable and animal levels, at least in bovine cattle. So this gives us the possibility to rethink about how Argentina is going to go back into the world as a global biofactory. It states a farming activity that is beyond cereal and beef or meat, but it's hopeful because farms are now considered that are as having initiatives to have second-generation biofuels, capturing energy, recycling, and capturing scrap in several productive stages in the private sector that are really, really hopeful. Thank you.
Ay, no sé que cuando dijo algo.
Tenemos en este encuentro de charla
So along the same line of this presentation, Gustav was telling us that we have to produce, industrialize, and market or commercialize to capture all the value that they are achieving in Paraguay. Touring the fields, I could see that they are very respectful of the environment. They have a fragile system that they take care. They have ways of producing that allow them to take ecological care, and also they have some parameters that still have to be improved. For instance, with milked cows, and they are aware of the fact that they can improve a lot, that have a potential improvement. The concept that they have is that although they have this possibility to improve in the future, they try to do the best from the very beginning. So they have this concept of being being a link of an agro-industrial chain from the very beginning. They have their own cold storage facilities, the dairy industry, and many other things that Gustav will share with us. Really, we take pleasure to introduce him. You are welcome. Good afternoon. Thank you, Apresid, for inviting me. And I want to thank Rodolfo, Marcelo, and others that support us in Paraguay. It's a pleasure to be with you today in this event. It is a very important event. It's the first time I attend this meeting. I'm really grateful to be able to present our development model we are implemented in Central Chaco. I will tell you some background so you understand what we do, where we come from, and where we are going to. We come after the Martin Luther King reform in 1500s. We had to go to Russia. We stayed there more than 200 years, and then we went to Prussia. Then we went to Russia from 1788 to 1874. So our ancestors preferred to go to Canada. They stayed there for 53 years until the start of the Second World War, 1919, because that was
idioma alemán. Eso se vio amenazado. Entonces tuvimos que buscar.
Apologies again, there were problems with the connections. The objective of our group was Argentina, but in the traveling from Washington to Argentina, they met the president of Paraguay, and we were invited by the Paraguayan president to come to Paraguay. That's why we are now settled in Paraguay. We arrived in Paraguay in this vessel in 1927. The first years were quite difficult. We had no money, and we had to deal with hostile indigenous communities. This was the work started by our grandparents in 1927. This is how we worked there. This was our first days there. These were harvesters, sorghum harvesters, and they had mills of their own. This is the first industrial facility of the cooperative. This is 1932. This was the first cold storage, or the first slaughterhouse we had. This is the dairy industry. That was 1952, where we opened the first dairy facility in central Chaco. This is a cheese factory. They had to travel 70 kilometers with oxen first, then by train, in order to reach, to get to Asunción. This was the first store built. The only transportation means were carts, oxen, and the train. This cooperative is located in the eastern part of Chaco, the Chaco region. This is the green shaded area. It has 1 million hectares, 300 kilometers north to south, and 150 kilometers from west to east. There is very little population here, and we still continue producing here. Our colony was founded in 1927. The cooperative grew because for the need of having to live on something, and the cooperative model was developed because there was no state activity in the region. The distribution network belongs to the cooperative, so there's also no government, no state hospital, no public hospital. So we have to provide everything. Our policy is to produce, industrialize, and commercialize, so there's no intermediary between the producer, the grower, with the company owner, and the end consumer. And in this way, we reduce administration expenses. The administration system is a democratic system where authorities are elected every 4 years by the assembly. The assembly proposes the candidates, and they also elect the candidates. We have two institutions: the civil association that has 7.7 thousand members. It is responsible for the regulation of the social aspect: education, health, senior citizens, social expenditure. This institution has been created under the law for non-profit cooperatives. And the other institution is the commercial institution. The two institutions have the same president, the same executive board, but the general manager is different. There's one for the association, and there's another one for the cooperative. I will refer exclusively to the cooperative. I won't talk much on the civil association. The civil association is responsible for primary, secondary, and higher education, with other two cooperatives that work together with us in Chaco. It has internal security, communication, culture, social aspects. It is regulated under these civil associations. We also have a group that is responsible for managing issues related to marginal population. The cooperative has a general manager, an education department, a department for members, a dairy farm facility, a supermarket chain. It have a cold storage facility, credit department, human resources, services, technical assistance, and industry with different products. And also it has a finance department, real estate department, and it has a distribution system in Paraguay and as well as Bolivia, where our products are sold. These are social expenses. The budget for this year is $24 million that are 35% is distributed to the livestock sector. Private companies contribute with 18%. Fixed contribution paid by members 16%. Salaries 16%. Salaries for 3,000 employees, and others represent 8%. Where do social expenditures are used for? First, education. 24% of each contribution goes to the education department. Then it goes to the health care. We have one hospital with 18 doctors. We have medical insurance, health insurance. On that, if you have education and health, the rest comes alone, comes naturally. 13% goes for road, and this excess, that the surplus that we have, 15%, the surplus is given back to the members. It's not that we use more money than we needed. We also have a share for pensioners, for senior citizens. Also, we have social security, and we are also cooperated with the national police because the state is not able to cover all our needs. Our vision is to be a successful, sustainable cooperative that strongly contributes to strengthening the economy of its members and the Paraguay economy with social and environmental responsibility. The mission is to contribute through the supply of high-quality productive services to strengthening the economy and improving the quality of life of members. We are convinced about the cooperative ideals: self-help, self-administration or self-management, solidarity, etc. The most financially important departments are the dairy facilities, the cold storage facilities, the saving department, and credit and loan department. Our income is represented 42% by the meat sector, 22% of the commercial sector, and 22% the dairy sector, 9% services, 5% industry, and only 2% of the agricultural sector. This is our challenge. We will implement a new policy to boost this. Our turnover for 2017 has been $544 million. This is the billing system. The highest billing comes from Frio Chorti, which is the cold storage plant. Then this is followed by the dairy sector, the sales room, credits, loans, and savings. We export our meat to 24 different countries. This is an added value. We believe that we need to produce products that can be exported to different countries around the world so that the producer has a return for his work. These are the bovine cattle. These are bullocks. We had to implement our own water supply system. We have a water treatment plant that supplies us the necessary water. This is the slaughtering. Last year that grew to 247,000 animals per day. The same happens in the dairy farm sector. This starts in the dairy farm, then it is kept in the cold chain, and then it goes to the industry, to the marketplace. We produce 150 million liters of milk. We intend to reach the number of 500,000 liters per day. Right now we are producing 300,000. We also have a supermarket chain, because what's the use of having modern industry that produce a sophisticated product and not to have without having the possibility to sell this product. We have a chain of 7 supermarkets, and also we have a trading system or a commercial system in Asunción. We need to add value, and we need to provide the sophistications required by the market. So we need to be as most industrialized as possible. The market experienced an increase of 14% in billing or turnover, and this is what made us so strong. In the industry sector, we have oil producing company, pinning, cotton pinning. These cooperatives are the cooperatives do their own maintenance, and they do their own distribution. The feed factory, animal feed. Right now we are building new silos, a new silo with a capacity of 200,000 kilos per hour to receive grain. This product is strongly growing. Biotechnology and GMOs also represented growth and development, and this makes us even stronger. We also have a very important part, which is the loan or credit section. The cooperative has its own loan system. The loans are intended for the building of pens, infrastructure, dairy farms, machinery. Everything is this is funded by the cooperative. Our portfolio is $166 million. Some are checking accounts, and the rest are deposits and savings of the COPE members. We participate in an important program. We talk a lot about sustainability. We believe in the sustainability of farms. A producer that is 70 or 80 years old and wants to give up farming, and so the cooperative sets a price for this farming, for this farm, or for this establishment, and this it is sold to younger producers. And these young people are willing to continue producing, and this gives sustainability to our cooperative. This is what we call generational sustainability. And the loan portfolio, as you can see, 83% are represented by the productive sector, and the rest are distributed in consumption and refunding or refinancing. What I have just said about having intermediaries in this dairy farm, we need to understand that young people need to go to the farming sector. The solution is not in urban cities. We need to understand this, and if we don't understand it, we will face serious social problems. So we need to give them loans to build a house, to build a dairy facility, a production center, and also we need to give them credit so they can buy a car or a truck or have access to internet. So we need to understand this. We need to create favorable conditions for young people to go and work and live to the countrysides. The other option is to have owners of large pieces of land, and this will be a problem in the future. Regarding services, we are providing different services to growers regarding human resources, taxing, 1,800 growers keep taxing records to the members because they don't understand anything about taxes. We also have a capitalization system. We have a strong capitalization system. This system consists in paying a percentage of, we pay 1 or 2% less to the products, and this goes to a social fund to finance new projects. And so this remains as a social capital, and this is paid 65 or 80 years later, so they have their pension, and this also helps financing the cooperative. This is the way capitalization proceeds in the different, the integrated capital of capitalization is $11.2 million, no, $99.2 million. We have created a bank. It is a cooperative bank. Production cooperatives have a portfolio of $150 million. This bank is 6 years old. This is the only bank in Paraguay that most of its portfolio is in the farming sector. We are importing some fertilizers. Sencoprod is a leather factory. Whatever is produced here is exported to different countries. We have Pioneros del Chaco S.A. is a new corporation made up by cooperative. In this way, we can take care of development in Chaco Central, not only in Paraguay, but also in the region of Chaco. We have a close relationship with the INTA. We are also working with this chakra systems, and we want to work together at the regional level through the bi-oceanic waterway. Here we have the cold storage facilities. This is a fat factory. This is a logistics center. And this is a new powder milk plant that was opened this year. This is the industrial complex. And this is a cultural center. A society that grows by 8 and 10% annually and does not invest in social aspects or human resources to promote music. Here we have 400 music students, also drama students. So a society that does not invest in all this has no life of its own. I apologize for having gone beyond the allocated time, but
Okay, we're going to start now with the Q&As. Roberto Vicen, you have the mic right there. Do you recommend companies, farm companies, vertical proceeds to have a bio factory? Are we at the right time to do it? Do you have any recommendation? I think that's a highly desirable path to take. If we're at the right time or not to do it, I don't know. We come from a drought period. We've had a few farmers that were left behind. I think we have to give it a long-term perspective in two aspects mostly. First, those are investments that you can really see the ROI in 4 to 5 years, and the annual ROI and the capitalization also will be seeing 8% in assets. In fact, if the decision is to remain in the farm and the possibility to continue doing business on third-party lands, at the values of the rents now, it's adding value per hectares and not hectares per value is the best way to go. No more questions for now. That's it. Gustav, a question for you from me. What is the outlook into the future? What are you thinking about in order to continue with the same line? What new added value strategies do you have ahead? I think that the Chaco Paraguayo region and the South American Chaco has a great potential for development. And the bioceanic road that is being built connecting through Paraguay is paying off already. They have to start building that road and to finish that bridge with Brazil. And that will face us to new challenges, challenges that we haven't found met before. And then in Chaco, we have huge growth opportunities and development opportunities. And to put the north area in the map in biodiversity, in green products, I think Chaco will have huge opportunities as it was presented by my fellow speakers. I think in view of those challenges, we are on the right path. I think we're going to produce and give the maximum added value to whatever we produce, and that way we will go back to being competitive. Cooperatives play a very important role. They are still a development tool that is very useful as long as it is well managed by professionals, professionally managed, and only then will they contribute in this area. They are really strong. Cooperatives are very strong in the social economic development of regions. Miguel, question for you. Around the world, there is a huge demand of organic products, especially city dwellers. Do you see there is a coincidence between that and the logical carbon footprints, the technology used properly? Do you see that is only going to be for the short run, or there's going to be definitely an organic trend and everything else left behind? I feel that in our country, it's still a niche production. People with only wealthy people can afford it. I had a chance to talk with French farmers about this, and I was convinced that bioproducts were green products. But it's biodynamic farming, and they say that this is mostly for city dwellers. It's like a cult kind of thing. They keep on thinking that everything that is not green is contaminated. Of course, this is a very wrongful concept, but I don't know if in the world there is a higher demand of everything that is organic. It is, but only for a certain group of people. What we do see is that there are certain products that have a special traceability that are very sought after. Healthy products is mostly the case, and not necessarily organic products. And those paths can be walked along in Argentina. And I think organic products imply it's a very costly production nowadays, and I think it's specific for a very specific niche. Another question. So what about environmental indicators? Those indicators, what environmental indicators do we show on products that we export compared to other products? How are we doing? I think that in Argentina, some aspects of it have to do with the local market, and we have SENASA, the office that I think is very serious and it has a good reputation, and we have a lot of problems in the place of origin. We don't have problems with massive production, but mostly with intensive production. Everything that reaches city markets, for example, Buenos Aires, SENASA proves that there is an important load of pesticides. And it also comprises the carbon footprint in the local market. That is not being shown yet. But if we have to show it, how will that place us in the world market? I think Roberto explained it very well. We are well trained to do it. There is no problem for us to show what the carbon footprint for the products are. But we need to have good origin-based data. So it's an algebraic calculation with an Excel file. We just with a spreadsheet we can definitely calculate it. How much do we consume? How much CO2 is going into the atmosphere? So for the country, we need to have our own emission calculations. So in general, developed countries have their own gas emissions calculations. In Argentina, we still don't show that. In the Kyoto Protocol, it's part of the Annex 2, and that is not being used in Latin America. Chile, Peru, Brazil is on the right track. In Argentina and our national administration through INTA, where I work, we should make a greatest effort to produce those numbers so that we prove that we are actually emitting less. Our emissions are low. Gustav, a question for you. What is the relationship between the cooperative with the government of Paraguay, with the administration? We have a very good relationship with the government. We speak frequently. We have a fluent conversation with the parliament, with the president. I think that we are in good grounds, and we perhaps would need a little bit more push in terms of infrastructure, which is right now the biggest problem. Something that the professor mentioned before, the private sector usually is a lot faster in developing its own internal policies, and politics or administrations are a little slower. And the same thing happens in Chaco as well. So what is the land ownership system that you have there? Some people want you to explain it a little bit. So the land belongs to the colony. Okay, the cooperative buys the land. It divides it in lots, 500, 400 hectares, and the young person has access to that. We sell them, and he can pay in 15 years, and we charge them in liters of milk or in kilograms of cotton or in kilograms of meat, for example, 500 kilograms of meat per hectare, or as many liters of milk per hectare. And that is something that we do in order to give access to the young people. We give them the property deed is held with the cooperative, but they get a contract, and they can definitely negotiate that paper, that contract, among the other members of the cooperative at current market value, face value. Okay, several questions for you, Gustav. How do you? What about contamination and pollution? Are you measuring pollution or soil pollution? Are you using any parameters to evaluate the sustainability of the systems that you manage? Yeah, Paraguay has very strict environmental rules. 55% of the surface has to you can work the land there, but then the rest goes to forests and protected areas. We are still working on expanding the workable land. And in terms of contamination and pollution in Chaco, I cannot say that we have none. We do have, and we have salinity on the soil because we're not in a transition phase, but we're working, continuously working on them. In general terms, we can say that we comply with environmental rules and laws, and we have very low pollution rates so far. There is a question that is for you. Could a system like that work in Argentina? A system like the ones you have, a cooperative like the one you have there in Paraguay, could that work here? Do you think it could work here? I think definitely it could work. There is a group of farmers that want to form a cooperative. I think that's the starting point, and it's an interesting option. It could work anywhere in the world. We have seen this happen in Canada, in Japan. I've seen many cooperatives there, but here, the ACA group here in Argentina is showing a very interesting progress on that aspect. The family of cooperatives around the world is huge, and I think in South America many cooperatives, production cooperatives, have died, and it's a pity because that is related to the lack of protection and regulations. In our case, our cooperatives are regulated by law, and they have certain advantages over other companies. The economic activity between the members and the government, they do not pay taxes. It gives them more competitiveness, of course. It's a benefit. They don't pay taxes. So members of the cooperative, they make more money if they make their companies profitable and work. So it's a blend system between that modern cooperative with the principles used in the capitalist world. And I think we have to adapt ourselves to the new times, or you'll be destitute to death. I think we are on time. I want to thank the three speakers. It was a pleasure and an honor to share with you. Now we will go and process all the information that you left with us, extending the boundaries of the primary production of the farms, looking at the world in a different way. There is a lot of feedback, and it's not just we have to come and go and try to enter into that trading trend. And I love the way that the added value production is. It was a pleasure to share with you, and we look forward to seeing you next year. Thank you.